It's a real honor and a delight to be here today. Thank you very much. Special thanks to the Justice and Environmental Network and Csaba Kis for inviting me to present today about my research on children's rights and climate change, more particularly about my book that was published last year. It's titled Children as Climate Citizens, a social legal approach to public participation. And I will showcase some of these theories on children's climate citizenship through an example from the European Court of Human Rights, the Duarte Agostinho case. I will try to speak also to the online participants in a way that they will understand without seeing the slides. So my book was built on a 7-year-long PhD research that was conducted in law and children's rights at the University of Antwerp. And I started this research in 2014 and finalized it in 2011. The empirical part of the research was conducted continuously as the research was evolving along with the major developments of the climate grassroots social movements of young people around the world, the exponential growth of these movements and activities, and also the growing body of strategic rights-based climate change litigation in case law. In my research, I was primarily interested in how we can grasp the right to public participation of children in climate change governance. And I faced a number of challenges right at the start. First of all, in the climate change context, children are more likely to be associated with their vulnerabilities and their lifelong experience of the climate crisis and the harms it causes to them. But the underlying notion of my research and also of my book is that children should not be viewed on the basis of their vulnerabilities only. Because we have a vast evidence that children are agents of their own views, ideas, and demands, and they do have their own climate change agenda. So what I did is that basically I established a theoretical framework for arguing for climate citizenship of children. And in this theoretical framework, I built on existing theories of citizenship, spaces, and activities of children, such as deliberative citizenship theories. And I created a notion that combined public participatory theories and also citizenship theories and deliberation, democratic processes for children. So this concept was children as climate citizens. And this concept served as a golden thread in my book. Then I explored the legal and policy framework that applies to children's public participation in climate change matters. And this entailed the convention, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, but also legal theories of good governance and stakeholder participation in environmental law, as well as soft law and policies at the international level that explicitly provide spaces of public participation for children and youth at the United Nations governance system. So once I gathered the legal basis for children's public participation, I looked at what really happens on the ground, and basically how children's actions and experiences and demands in climate matters that can be understood as pathways of public participation are realized. In empowered institutionalized spaces such as the United Nations Climate Change Governance System and negotiations conferences such as the COP, for example, and also in grassroots social movement activism, as well as in strategic climate change litigation, where an increasing number of children are acting as plaintiffs. So in this book, the social legal approach serves to showcase how these practices of climate citizenship by children are affected by the legal and political conditions, and the other way around, how children's partaking as citizens has any influence or impact on shaping politics and law. We need to move on to the next slide. Thanks. So just before I elaborate on the concept of children's climate citizenship, let me clarify some terms of references. So I use basically a legal concept of the child throughout my book, which is established in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 1, and it states that children the concept of child applies to persons below the age of 18 years. Adolescents and youth, however, are a different group of, I would say, policy-based groups, not legal terms. And adolescents are usually characterized as young people between the age of 10 and 18 years, as described by the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child. And youth is a group, mainly a policy-based group created by the United Nations, and it applies to young people between the age of 16 and 25, but in reality, as also my book showcases this, in the United Nations governance system, it applies to people between the age of 18 and 25 plus, even up to 35 years. So what do I mean by children as climate citizens, if you could? Again, once again, this slide outlines the terms of references for children, adolescents, and youth, and technically youth are not the same group as children. It's important to emphasize, especially in the context of my book. Could we move on to the next slide already? Thank you. So what does climate citizenship of children mean? It is to be emphasized that this is not a legal concept as such. It conveys the views, the actions, the demands, and the perceptions and experiences of children regarding their partaking in climate change matters. It applies mainly to children concerned about climate change and its impacts on humanity and nature in the broader sense, including environmental and social justice, social, political, economic implications of climate change as a whole. The concept carries specificities, though, for children, both from the abstract and theoretical angle and both in practice. So for the first one, in the theoretical context, I would say that children's citizenship is not a concept that applies to a non-active or dormant status that will become active once they reach the legal maturity, which is typically the age of 18, once they can practice full citizenship status in society. Because a vast body of studies, psychological, developmental studies, childhood studies show that children can act as active citizens who are engaged in various sorts of citizenship activities, such as public consultations, deliberations, protests, public speeches, citizens' assemblies, and so on. An increasing amount of research shows that children's civic engagement is beneficial not only to children themselves, as they learn how to enjoy and live up to their citizenship, but also it is beneficial to the society as a whole, because these active young citizens are likely to develop a lifelong commitment to democratic values and also to stand up for a just and fair society. Secondly, climate change is a global problem. And in other words, it does not stop at national borders. Climate citizenship shows a specificity in a sense that it is not linked to the national sovereignty and the national territory. It's more of an abstract transborder geographical and social concept that can be ranged from the local to the global context, and it can be decentered and connected across the globe through physical and digital spaces and tools. Thirdly, although the children's climate citizenship is in principle a non-legal concept, it does entail rights-based implications. This means that children have a legal basis to act as climate citizens. As mentioned, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child empowers them with certain rights that are generally associated with adult citizens. These are, for example, the right to participate in decision-making that affects them, the freedom of expression, the freedom of peaceful assembly, the freedom of association, also the right to information. In addition, at the international governance level, children are recognized as key stakeholders in sustainable development, and their participation is institutionalized in the United Nations system. They are entitled to participate, to sit at the table with political decision makers, also in climate change matters, because this is a problem that affects them immensely. And finally, despite these entitlements, children still lack the means and full citizenship status to exert direct influence on political leadership and to hold decision makers accountable. Therefore, they tend to employ various means of participation that are available to them in order to have their rights recognized and respected in connection to climate change, and also to urge effective measures against the causes and harms that climate change can have on them in their course of their lives. Could we move on to the next, please? So this is the picture, if you could click one more, is a good illustration of different pathways of children's citizenship activities and participation in climate change matters. It shows that these pathways are simultaneous and cross-cutting many times. Children tend to try to exhaust all sorts of means at hand that they can have access to, or that they are available to them, just to have a voice and also to exert influence on decision makers. And among these pathways, I studied the participation in climate change conferences, political negotiations, online activism, litigation, climate change litigation in court settings, and also alternatives such as citizen assemblies, deliberative spaces of activism, and grassroots movements of children. Could we move on, please? To move on to the litigation part, I want to showcase to you, if we could click one more. Yes, it's over already. Yes, but okay, we took some time for the technicality, so let's, okay. So just let then move on to the next slide, to the Duarte Agostinho case, and I will just quickly talk about what it implies for children. One more. I thought I would be able to use the. Okay, so the Duarte Agostinho case was concluded this spring in 2024 at the European Court of Human Rights. And this was a case submitted by 6 young plaintiffs, among whom 3 of them were children. These young people were from Portugal, and they filed a case against originally 33 states, which was reduced to 32 during the process. And the case was basically against these countries who the plaintiffs argued took insufficient action and failed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, meet the targets of the Paris Agreement by limiting global warming to 1.5 Celsius. The central allegations of the case concerned the state's inaction to failure to address climate change adequately, the disproportionate impact on young people and future generations, so it had an intergenerational implications, and how that climate change and the contribution to climate change by the countries endanger lives and affect their physical and mental health, their homes and families. It violates human rights under the European Convention on Human Rights. However, the case was not successful. It was deemed inadmissible, mainly on procedural grounds. Could move on quickly to the next slide. One more, please. Yes, but before I conclude on how this case ended, just want to highlight a couple of important implications for children's rights in this case. So, for example, the right to life and the right to privacy and family life is a typical argument in strategic climate change litigation in the European context. But this case was special with regard to the right to the argument on the basis of the non-discrimination principle, and basically it argued that applicants are being made to bear the burden of climate change to a far greater extent than older generations. So the non-discrimination applied to children and also to future generations. The best interest principle of the child on the, from the United Nations Convention of the, on the Rights of the Child was also featured in this case among the legal arguments. And it was said that the best interest of the child must be a primary consideration, which actually has already been asserted by the court, the European Court of Human Rights, in many other cases before. And access to access to justice of children was also an important argument of the case, because it said that children have particular difficulties in accessing certain processes and remedies in domestic settings, and it should be considered by the court. The court, interestingly, fast-tracked the case and agreed that due to the urgency of the climate crisis and also on the basis of the arguments of plaintiffs, it can deal with this case in an urgent matter. But then ironically, in the ruling, it referred the young plaintiffs back to the Portuguese domestic system and said that they must exhaust domestic remedies first before turning to the European Court of Human Rights. If we could quickly switch. So the inadmissibility was on two grounds, mainly the non-exhaustion of domestic remedies by children, which was an inventive move in this case, quite unique. A previous precedent was similar to this in the Saki case, which was submitted at the United Nations level at the Committee on the Rights of the Child. But this case was also arguing that young people have a basis to submit cases directly at the regional or at the international level. The court did not find this applicable. And the other inadmissibility was on extraterritorial grounds. So the court went against previous decisions of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, also the United Nations CRC committee, and said that accepting the applicant's arguments would turn the convention into a global climate change treaty. It was quite a sarcastic note by the court, but it said that 22 countries cannot be held altogether responsible for causing harm in Portugal. And then other intergeneral considerations were not adjudicated in this case. However, parallel to this case, the Duarte Agostinho, there was another one which was more successful, the Clima Seniorinen, which could be regarded for also for other intergeneral cases in the future as a springboard, perhaps as empowering young generations and also future generations to be able to establish legal basis in courts. Okay, I think I will wrap up here because we ran out of time. But if you are interested, I am able to share with you these slides, and you can see more children's rights considerations about climate change litigation, especially in this Duarte Agostinho case, namely the moral elements, the risk and ethics questions, and potentials of this case for future litigation. Thank you very much. And I wish I could have talked further, but never mind. We can continue the discussion. So please get in touch with me, and happy to discuss further. Thank you.